Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are so glad you're here. It's so fun to see all of you, or many of you anyway, saying where you're tuning in from all around the world. It is such a joy to get to do these gatherings with you guys. My name is Carolyn Arends. If you are wondering how you got here, this is a Renovari webinar that we're calling Waiting in the Dark, Why We Need Advent This Year. So let's introduce our panelists. First is Lacy Finn Bor. Lacy teaches and provides spiritual direction for the Renovari Institute. Do you need to know anything else? She's at the Renovari Institute. She also works with the Doctor of Ministry program in spiritual direction at Fuller Theological. And many of you know her for her wonderful book. There's a few actually. Spiritual Conversations with Children came out last year, which is such a great book. The Life with God curriculum that I know so many of you make use of, and Good Dirt devotional for the spiritual formation of families, which works a lot with the church calendar and incredible resource this time of year. Lacey's just the best. She also provides spiritual direction for children and their parents at Haven House, which is a transitional housing facility for homeless families. Lacy, thanks for doing this. Hi, friend.
Hi, I'm so eager for the conversation. It's just a delicious time of year for it.
Delicious. Love it. Also with us is our friend Kai Nilsen, who we just heard laugh. Since 2019, Kai has served as senior pastor at Incarnation Lutheran Church. That's a good name for a church this time of year.
Indeed, it is.
Particular, any time of year.
Very liturgical.
Now.
Yes.
Yes. In Minneapolis, Minnesota. Before that, he served as lead pastor at Peace Lutheran outside of Columbus, Ohio, for many, many years, right? How many years were you there?
Yep. 26 years.
26 years.
Amazing. Yep.
Kai also teaches at the Renovari Institute. Like Lacy, he's also on Renovari's ministry team. He has a book called Renew Your Life that we did in the book club a few years ago that so many people value. And you did a book with your family. I'm trying to remember the name of it. For Everything a Season, 75 Blessings for Life's Milestones.
Oh, actually, Lacey's got it right there. Yeah.
Yeah, another great resource year round, but especially this time of year.
Yeah, I'll tell a little bit more about that when we get to that point, but it's great. And it's actually, I'm so glad to be here in this scrumptious time of year. If it can be delicious, it can also be scrumptious,
wow.
Right? I don't know.
I sense this is going to be an adjective kind of gathering. That's awesome.
Oh.
Listen, before we dive in to the questions here, we're going to do something a little bit different. When we were planning this out, we thought, hey, what if we used a song? We don't normally do this in webinars, but some of you know that I have this alter ego as a singer-songwriter, and I have a song that I wrote going into an Advent season several years ago. It was the first Christmas that I was going to observe since my dad had died, and I was having a kind of a hard time getting into the Advent season. And this year, for some reason, it seems appropriate again. This song, it's a trickier time for many of us entering into Advent. So we thought, as a chance for all of us to kind of get ourselves gathered up, we would listen to this song. I recorded it about an hour ago in this office and sent it in a rush to Monty. So hopefully it will work for him to play it for you, this live version of it. But it's called Vacancy. And as you listen to it, as we prepare for this conversation around your great questions, just pay attention to what you're bringing to this conversation. What are you feeling? What are your joys? What are you anxious about? What are you wondering about? As my friend Lacy likes to say, let yourself be present right where you are as you listen to this and as we prepare for this conversation. So if Monty can make the magic happen, we will have a listen to this. Seems like my Christmas cheer is hard to find this year. I think it vanished in the fall. Strange how a loss or two can eat away at you till there's not much left at home. But they say Advent is for waiting. Arends. Thanks. All right, you guys, we'll unmute you again if you can unmute yourselves. And yeah, thanks everyone to listening to that. Hopefully that helps us kind of enter in, those of us who are feeling a little vacant inside, or maybe you're feeling full inside. Either way, there are invitations in this season. So, and thanks for, I'm not supposed to pay attention to the chat, but I saw lots of nice words in the chat of people engaging with the song. So thank you. And we'll let you know where you can find it later if you want to find it. Okay, friends, as we dive into these questions, Lacy, will you just lead us in prayer just as we enter in?
I'd love to. Maybe we can just take a moment, and if you happen to be kind of a bodily person, to just take your hands and place them on your heart. Just gives you an opportunity to remember you have a body. Incarnation is so very bodily. Advent, waiting, pregnancy, so very bodily. So let's just take a moment, put our hands somewhere on us to remember we have bodies. Holy and loving God, we thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation with one another. Oh God, would you teach us how to wait? Would you teach us how to wait for our longing to come full term in Advent? You are the only one who really quite understands the complexities and the mystery of this process. And so we ask you to be our teacher, to help us. Would you guide our conversation today? Would you help us to hear you? We trust you. Help us to trust you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right, friends, let's start at the beginning. Vanessa and Scott and Becky all turned in the same question, which goes something like this. I have no experience with Advent. I have no idea what it is. Where do I begin? So for those of us tuning in with not a lot of experience with Advent, what is Advent? Lacy, you want to start?
Oh, sure. Just throw me out there right first. Advent is a season of waiting. Its liturgical color used to be purple, and some people still use the color purple as to be sort of this season of preparation for the Christ child. In order to do some distinctions, it's moved to sort of a royal blue. And it is a season of preparation, 4 weeks of getting ready for Christ to come. And it looks all kinds of different ways. You can practice this waiting in various different ways. In fact, I'm holding a little wad of silly putty right now as one way just to sort of, we can sculpt our way. We can, as we read the scriptures, just in preparation, lots of different ways to get into Advent.
Yeah.
Cool.
Let me, can I jump in there? I think I've had a love-hate relationship with the church year. Growing up in a more liturgical tradition, you're just locked into it. That's what you do. There's the rhythm that happens. It's Advent, so it's preparation for Christ's birth. A couple of weeks of Christmas that leads up to the coming of the Magi to the manger, Epiphany, and that means the manifestation of Jesus, like what's Jesus all about? Who is Jesus in this world? You get to Lent, which was traditionally the time of teaching, like what's this life of Jesus all about, especially as it leads to the death and resurrection. You got Easter and the celebration of his resurrection, and then Pentecost, which is then what does the church start to look like as you make your way into the world? And for a while, it was like binding me. And so I thought, we're just going to do sermon series at our churches. But I keep coming back to it because it helps us focus on the rhythm of Jesus' life and what it means for us today. And so you start, again, preparing for Christ's birth. You tell those stories again. You get connected with the incarnation, that God actually took on human form. That's remarkable if you think about that's one of the pivotal, essences of the Christian faith. And then you kind of just keep unwinding it and saying, what's this Jesus all about? And what do we need to know? What do we need to be taught in order to live more fully this life? And then the resurrection comes and you just sort of awaken in springtime, which is what Lent is all about. So for me, it's kind of nice to think through that whole rhythm. And I think that's why I keep coming back to the rhythm and going, these are critical things. Can I tell a quick story? All right.
Yes.
So this will, in my family, my dad is a Lutheran pastor. My mom probably would have been if she would have been able to in the 1960s. We have 5 kids in our family. 4 of us are Lutheran pastors. When the last one was ordained, we were in Iowa City, Iowa at the time, and the little local paper came out and said, "Oh, this is kind of a unique situation, so let's interview all these pastors." And they interviewed all of us, and one of the questions was, how did you decide to go into the ministry? We took 4 very different paths, but every single one of us talked about the Advent devotions and rituals that we did as a family and the Lenten devotions and rituals that we did as a family. And we all went back to those just core things that we'd every night, as much as we could, we'd gather as a family, just do a core reading, sing a song. We'd walk one step closer to the manger. My mom built this little raggedy looking manger that would always fall apart every year. We'd have to put it back together, and had 2 little biblical characters. And it was this kind of just time for the family to acknowledge what's going on. And so we all went back to what happened in our homes versus what happened in our churches as ways to understand why this was such a critical forming time for us as a family. And we said it all independent of one another. Nobody knew what we were going to say, and every one of us said the same thing. It was cool.
Love it. Love it.
I grew up outside of within a tradition that only celebrated Christmas and Easter. So I didn't understand the seasons of the church as being a way to sort of mark your life by the life of Jesus until I had my own children. And we, and they were young, and we were at home, and I was feeling isolated. And really celebrating those seasons of the church helped my children begin to learn and mark their lives by the life of Jesus, because this beautiful cycle of Jesus's life unfolds through the seasons of the church. And in this way, it helped me feel not so alone, because I was connected to a worldwide body of people who were celebrating.
Love it.
Yep.
I want later on there, we got a lot of questions about how to celebrate Advent in your home with young kids, with teenagers, if you're on your own. And I'm really looking forward to those. Both of you have these, Lacy, with your own kids, Kai in your growing up family, these wonderful Advent traditions. And I just want to say to anyone out there who is like, oh no, I blew it. My kids, I didn't do it with my kids. I tried. There was a time when I like you, Lacy, grew up without a lot of awareness of the church calendar. An Advent calendar was that thing with the little doors with the really bad waxy chocolate inside, right? That's what Advent was to me growing up. And when I started to wake up to the gifts and invitations of Advent, the first time I tried to do it with my kids, I had a liturgy, and I had candles, and they were just like, "What, Mom, what are you doing?" And it was a disaster. I went way overdid it. So I just want to tell you out there, you're not alone if it hasn't totally been a home run with your family. And we'll talk about that some more in a bit. But before we leave this basic question of what is Advent? Okay. So Pastor Kai, when does it start? How do we know when is the first day of Advent?
There's 4 Sundays before Christmas. So you go Christmas the 25th, back off, and the last 4 Sundays before that, that's when Advent starts. Interestingly enough, again, you've done these things for so long, sometimes I forget the history. And so you kind of poured back into it a little bit. And it probably was not even until the 5th century that it began to develop as a time of preparation for Christmas. And it was really for the monks, as the people in the monasteries would do a lot of fasting. So that's what the early rituals were around it. Like, we're just going to fast. We're going to allow ourselves to be present in them the best ways that we can to how Christ is going to speak to us as Christ comes back into our lives and into the world again. So, Yeah, four Sundays before Christmas Day.
So the start date moves around from year to year. You figure out, you go
Correct.
from whatever 4 Sundays before Christmas is, that's the first day of Advent. So
Yep.
this year, I think is it the 27th or the 29th? Anybody got it handy? I think it's the 29th. I think it's the 29th. Yeah.
End of
okay.
November. Yeah.
Okay. And you both made mention of so really, if we were going to strictly follow, maybe that's if we were going to fully follow the church calendar, it would be the period from 4 Sundays before Christmas right up to Christmas Eve, right?
Yeah.
And then Christmas would start on the 25th. Is that right?
Yeah.
And that would be observed for 12 days. So that
Correct.
12 days of Christmas isn't actually anticipated leading up to Christmas if we're following the church calendar. And then January 6th, we would enter the season of Epiphany, which is tied in tradition to the wise men coming to see the Christ child, right? So just probably most people listening know that, but
Putting
not everyone does. Yeah. So Kai, you were saying when we were talking about this beforehand, your family used to be quite strict about that Christmas doesn't start until the 25th. Can you describe what that was like?
It was hardcore and horrible if you were a kid, but it was what we chose to do. So we wouldn't do in our home anything until Christmas Eve. So the only thing that would be Christmassy about our house, no decorating or anything, is that we would, if we got Christmas cards, we'd hang them up around the door frame so that we'd kind of see the people that we know and love as they're making their offers of Christmas cards through the season. Christmas Eve, then we would put up the tree, we would decorate it, we would prep the meal. My dad was a pastor, as I said. He generally had 2 services. He'd do his 1 service, we'd have a meal, we'd open our presents, he'd go back to his service, we'd go to the late one. We always got a family game, and then we'd go from 12 to 3 and play the family game. So we would start everything on Christmas Eve. I did not adopt that when I had a family. No, and we're not crazy about it, but generally around the Thanksgiving Advent time, tree goes up, and we start the process of getting into it. So, but that was part of the tradition. That was the disciplined waiting for people to get ready to celebrate that the birth of Christ on Christmas Day.
Love it.
Yeah.
Lucy, I know you do decorate ahead of the Christmas Day, right?
Yeah, we just kind of come on it gradually. So
right.
For us, my husband is a healthcare worker, and so he may not have Christmas Day. We may not be able to sort of land on the day. And so having the 12 days of Christmas meant that we could arrive when he could be with us. It meant too that we could move slowly into Advent. So we had an Advent calendar too. But within it wasn't just candy, it was preparation. So for the kids, it would be one thing, a little piece of paper that had one thing that they could do to begin to prepare for Christmas. So every day leading up, they would have a little treat and something that they personally could do to begin to prepare. And that might be making cookies. It might be going through stuff in their closets to give away. Just sort of those little preparations to get us, help us make room for the Christ child.
Yeah.
Love it. And that's where there's this Advent is to Christmas as Lent is to Easter. If we're going to mark this huge moment in the life of Christ and how it's changed our lives forever, we need this period of preparation is the idea, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I will just say before we leave this idea of how it works with the calendar, Lacy, I've noticed you being very intentional about celebrating the full 12 days of Christmas once the 25th comes. And our family has started to experiment with that. And it's wonderful how it prolongs the season. You don't have that letdown. Here in Canada, we have Boxing Day usually on the 26th, which is this tragic shopping day. But this like, oh no, we're just getting started. Now there's these full 12 days of Christmas. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay. There were a group of questions about, obviously to understand what Advent is, that is, as you've both mentioned, to live into the whole church calendar. And so a lot of people, Kate and Jeff and Phyllis and Deborah and Steve and Elizabeth and Stacy, all had questions about, okay, what if I'm on board with the church calendar, but my worshiping community isn't? Do you have any suggestions for like how to ease people into kind of the gifts of the church calendar?
I would suggest that it's and I use this kind of analogy for just most things, that people come back from conferences or they come back from great experiences and say, oh, I wish we could do this, in my church, and then their church may or may not be connected with that. And so it's really a chance to just find some people. Maybe you just develop a small group of people who's willing to do it for you. Certainly talk to the leadership. Maybe that it's something that they haven't really had engagement with, and so that might be something that they would go, oh, that's kind of an interesting thing to try. Most things, I think, if you say, maybe we can experiment with something this year and give it a shot, it gives people a little bit more permission to say, we're not going to lock into it forever and ever. But I think, to find people, I always say, find a small group of people who are willing to walk that part of the journey with you. And if you gain some energy around it in the community, it might be something that more naturally that you can invite other people into. I think talking with whoever the pastoral leaders are about why, is a critical piece of it too.
Yeah. I wonder if right now, since we're in a season of being dispersed, if it might be an opportunity, if you want to see what a worshiping community who lives together the seasons of the church, getting on a Zoom call with a church who practices that, and getting, it's a unique time in our world where you could see what that looks like.
Love it.
And I think one more thing, I think it's interesting to, depending on what tradition you're coming from, there's been more or less connection with the liturgical cycles and church years, et cetera. And sometimes that, based on how it's been presented to you over time, becomes sort of spooky and, it's for those churches over there. I think Lacy's description of it is fantastic. You're just connecting yourself with the rhythms of Jesus' life. That's a very different way of thinking about it than, hey, we're going to get locked into what the church has been doing for thousands of years around a ritual. No, let's look at the life of Jesus and see how we can emulate that in our own practice. That may be a way to enter into the conversation with people who aren't even used to the language as much too.
And coming from a church tradition that had some definite fears around the word ritual. One of the ways that sort of helped me to move into it, towards it a little bit, was seeing ritual as just a place to park our feelings. So ritual is a thing that you do, lighting the Advent candles every week is a ritual, but it is a place to park the feelings that we feel around what's happening, around how we're marking our lives by the life of Jesus, around how we're making room, about that movement from incredible darkness to light. The ritual just helps us park those somewhere.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. There were some questions about how do rituals not become ritualistic. And I think you've already talked about how alive this has been in your homes and your churches, a place to park your feelings. You've already spoken to that. But I also nobody complains about the ritual of the stuffing and the particular kind of cornbread and the
absolutely.
We are people that need those traditions and those things to come back to, right? They get more and more resonant every year. Yeah. They carry more and more of our memories and our journeys. So maybe even the word of just traditions or practices. I haven't heard anything too ritualistic in how you've described this journey so far. Okay, so these friends that asked us early on, okay, what is Advent and how do I practice it? So when the 29th comes around, let's start on the individual level, then maybe we'll talk about the church level for people who are doing planning for their churches, especially in this weird season where we often can't be together, and then on the family level. Okay, so as an individual, when the 29th comes around, if I don't want to let Advent get away from me this year, what should I do?
have a good devotional. Can I just say that? Have something to read or a way to really connect this to the life of Christ. I can suggest a few that I really love.
Please do.
Can I? I love Trevor's. Yeah. Trevor Hudson has this one, Pauses for Advent, which I really like. They're short. So I have teenagers now. And so this keeps them with us in the reading. So, so really practically, I'll have chosen a devotional and I'll have my Advent wreath with 4 candles out, actually 5. So 4 around the outside, 5th, the Christ candle in the middle for Christmas, Christmas Day. That's practically what I will be, make sure that we're ready.
Yeah. That's great. Anything you would add to that, Kai?
I just think, you know, this year is such a topsy-turvy year, and it's been hard for people on so many different levels. And I think a deep commitment to yourself and your own vitality and your spiritual life could be very life-giving for you. And so I do a quick parallel. I ended up doing a way longer run than I ever thought I was going to ever be able to do this year. And but the only way that I did it is that somebody actually gave me a plan for 12 weeks. And I like looked at that plan and I said, this is the only way I'm going to go from here to here. So if to start, I think you just make it 5 minutes, make it 10 minutes in any given day. We've just put out a little thing for our congregation. I know we're going to move into that question in a little bit, but this just simply hope, and that's our theme for the season, but it's a way for people to just every day pause for a moment with themselves or families and just ask a couple of questions. And then we're actually going to use the Advent wreath as a symbol again this year. And so to light a candle. So we need to make it accessible and bite-size at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And candidly, my family growing up was way less committed to, not less committed to it, but less able to do it than my family growing up, because
your family, your kids, right? Got it.
Because we had travel sports and we had every activity. I mean, our family hit that zone where with 4 kids, when would we even sit down together? Mm-hmm. And so then you'd have to just choose, like, when you sit down with one another, what are you going to be willing to talk about? And that's why you kind of put a placeholder out there, and it didn't happen as consistently as we would have wanted it to, but we could at least come back to it. And we had a space in our house, a non-TV space, that when people knew they kind of entered that space, it was to be together and to have conversation. And so that's how we kind of programmed it. And I'd love to say it was as consistent as, you know, my mom allowed it to be when we were growing up and my dad, but we designed our family the best way that we could, given the circumstances of all the different things that our kids were involved in.
Right.
Kai, I appreciate so much you using the language of placeholder. So it is not, you know, I think one of early on as we tried to practice in the seasons of the church, I marked success as we did it every single time. But that wasn't the most important part about it. It was being present when we did have it, and really just using it. It is a placeholder. It is a place to return to, not somewhere that we have to power our way through.
Yeah,
that's great. Let's talk for a minute, because Kai, you kind of took us there. For people who are involved in how their church is going to navigate Advent this year. Some churches can't meet at all. Some churches can meet, but with lots of restrictions. How is your church navigating it? You started to allude to it a bit, and then let's hear your guys' ideas. What we can do with church life.
So, not knowing where we were going to be in being able to be in person or not in person, and we're like right on the cutting edge of making that decision, because numbers are spiking all over up in the upper Midwest. So we'll be making some decisions probably within the next week or so. But knowing that, we wanted to be able to create some way for the community to be connected And so what we did is we kind of created these out of notes, a little box with then the 4 candles on the outside, so one for each Sunday, and then the Christ candle in the center. They can decorate the box in whatever way they want to, so it makes it a sort of a unique individual and or family experience. And then we put together the daily guide for us. So then in worship, what we will do is we will open up with worship, whether it's our online experience or if we're able to be in person, with lighting the candles and a reminder that this is what we do as a community. So whether you're able to be present with us in a space or if you're just present with us in your home, then we can be together in that way. And so that's going to be, it's kind of the connective tissue for us within community in this upcoming year. And we wanted to make it really simple because, again, I think there's just a lot of heaviness that people are feeling this year. And within that, there's different kind of levels of questions versus if you have kids with you or if you're alone or if you want to invite somebody else in a small group to be involved in the process with you. So
thanks for showing us
that's what we're
that.
doing as a community this year. Yeah.
Will you just open it up and just show us like what one day looks like, just so we can see? Yeah,
Yes, indeed. Hold on. Yep.
And people, so basically families in your church or individuals in your church come pick up this box.
Yep.
And the idea is that everybody in the church is kind of going through this journey together.
Yep. So let's see. So there's actually, I don't know if you can see this or not. I will just show it to you and then I'll kind of read to you what the components are. So there's just an opening 3 or 4 sets of words that people say with one another. If they choose to sing, they can. It's a reminder, O Come, Emmanuel is kind of a classic song from 1300 years ago that's been part of the Christian tradition. And then there's a reading that they can have that we will be using in church on Sunday. So again, it's a way to connect up what's happening. And then what we did is each week we have a different theme about hope. So hope is persistent, hope is participatory, hope is patient, hope is promised. And then there are a set of just questions. And the first one's always share a story of hope. And so it's a way for people to recall stuff in their life if they're alone or if they're in a family, to just start talking with one another about what's hopeful even in these times. And then you just see that there's a whole list of questions or other ideas that they could do as an individual or family to enter more deeply into that particular theme of the week. So that's how we designed. So every day of that week, they could come and light that one candle. And so every day of week 2, they light 2 candles. Every day of week 3. And there's enough questions and or activities in there that if they could do it every day, great, there'd be plenty of material. If they only get 1 or 2 times in a week, there's still options to be guided in that process.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, lots of questions, and we've already started to go here, but I know this is such a strength for both of you, and especially for Lacy. Little kids, inviting little kids into Advent, older kids, teens, adult kids. What suggestions do you have? What resources would you point us to?
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned this already, but this is the book that I wrote with Ben Barksey. It's called Good Dirt, Advent, Christmastide, and Epiphany. And it just has a rhythm and lots of ways to engage children, all the way from young children through teens in it. I think of 2 words that I would say are the foundation of a good Advent practice, maybe. And the first is light. Like, is there a way for you as a family to mark the movement from dark to light? So in the Northern Hemisphere, this is happening right now. So that's happening all around us. What would that look like? And that's lighting the candles. What other ways could you as a family mark the movement from dark to light? And the second is to listen. So maybe it is that you know, as Kai used that phrase, that you have a placeholder, and maybe that's 5 minutes after dinner or during dinner, or maybe that's a Sunday at a certain time, or maybe that's, you're deciding when your placeholder is. And in that time, you notice the increasing light together. You engage the story of Jesus in some way, lots of devotionals like we've talked about, and then just listen to one another. Is there a way for you to mark your alleluias so that you're an alleluia from head to toe? And that's Augustine. But are there ways to?
Okay, let me press in on that, because that sounds interesting, but I don't know what that would look like. So okay. I'm at home with little kids, and I want to mark our hallelujahs from head to toe. What happens?
Well, for our family, it looks like before they went to bed at night, we had a big piece of paper on the wall, and we would say, "What are you most grateful for?" And the only rule was you couldn't repeat something. So as we're moving in this season from dark to light, we're seeing the light and the hope physically increase on this piece of paper that we've tacked to the wall. Don't use a permanent marker, by the way. And so that's just one way you can do it. I mean, I mentioned the silly putty. Maybe every kid has a little silly putty egg, and at dinner they sculpt what their alleluia is, what they're grateful for that day. And it's just sitting there on the table. And it's this movement again from dark to increasing light. And in their sharing, a couple of things. Remember, adults share too. It's your faithfulness. And it really means sort of right where you are. What are your alleluias right now? And not sort of a Pollyanna alleluias, because children can smell us fake at 50. They just can. Yeah. So what are your genuine alleluias in the moment? And then, really just listening. So those two L words, increasing light, and then really listening deeply to one another. Yeah. And I feel like I also can't mention our alleluias without mentioning that we do have sorrows, and that paradoxical place where our deep joys are also where our sorrows are as well. Yeah. And so knowing that those two can come up in the same space as you're sharing.
Yeah.
Have there been ways in Advent? I'm really glad you said that, because we did get a lot of questions about the space for lament in Advent, about what do I do if everybody's experiencing COVID differently. So some people, it's like a wildly creative time. And then other people, it's a very dark time of separation and longing and loss. So how say with a family, you've told us how you marked your hallelujahs. I love that. How do you create space for lament, for darkness, for loss, for longing?
I think there's a lot of different ways. One way that we have as a family is we sort of have a permanent little book that's out on the coffee table tucked away so others can't see it. But it is a place where we as a family go and write our laments over the years. On the outside, it says, Dear Jesus. But on the inside, it's just a place. We've had some laments in our families and some loss. And I wonder about just, having a Dear Jesus place in your home where that can really just place those. The other is to, in the listening, could you mark your alleluias and also your losses? Right now, we as a world do have losses, and being present and listening to one another helps when we express our losses to hear those deep longings that are underneath.
That's good. How do you think about the ratio, Kai, of light and dark, joy, sorrow, lament, celebration in an Advent season as you're pastoring people and in your own life?
Sure. One of the things that I think is important is to not over spiritualize things too. I think that's what keeps my sense over the years in talking to people. It sort of keeps people into even entering these rituals or more traditional elements, because they think they somehow have to get into a zone of being really spiritual for us to be able to do this. The radical news of the incarnation is that God entered life, daily life, normal life, hard life, good, joyous life, and God is present in all of it. And so I think to sometimes it's helpful just to back up and just say to people, tell me what's good about your life right now and tell me what's hard. Don't over spiritualize it because God's in all of it. And I think that's allowing it to be, giving sort of permission for it to be a messy experience as well as a good and wonderful experience. Quick thing, I remember one of my most glorious times, we thought, my wife and I thought we'd hit it at this moment. We had 4 young kids at this time. We were sitting in the tree, the lights were twinkling. Our kids had these little and cherub voices, you know, and so we were singing a song or something. It was just fantastic. We remember sort of looking at each other going, this is the moment. This is the thing that we've been waiting for. And almost at that moment, one of the kids took up like the shepherd from the manger scene and was like dive bombing it at the manger and just like throwing it down, just going with things like that. And then all of a sudden we realized that they were like, you know, shooting for Jesus in the manger. We were like, no, not Jesus. And, and it just completely dissolved. I mean, it was just this, we thought it was this glorious spiritual moment, and it was just life, and it didn't work. And you just have to be honest with that. And I think that's, hopefully we've given our kids, and hopefully I think the communities that I've been involved in, it's just life. This is what it's all about. And life is really hard sometimes, and life is really beautiful sometimes. And it's all wrapped up in who we are as God's people. So let's just say that and talk about it with one another. Yeah, that's, and we've done, really I see a number of people putting in that they do something called Blue Christmas. And I don't know if that's a piece of a tradition. What we've done here in my present congregation and in the past too is generally just set aside a time where we know that, especially people who've gone through any kind of loss in the previous year, specific loss, there's going to be an empty chair at the table. It's a chance for them to gather around a service and just acknowledge it, and just to say where they are and to sit in it, and to know that God is present in that, and the community represents how God is present, even if they can't sense that God is present. Other people walking a common journey remind us that God is present with us, even if we can't see it at the time because we're overwhelmed with whatever else is happening in our lives. So I think, and it's important to acknowledge that and to put that out in a public way. We don't expect it to be a happy, jolly, wonderful experience. It's not the most wonderful time of the year for everyone. It's just not. Right. And so how can we as a body, as a community with one another, walk into that place with each other? And I think those are critical pieces for community and for families to be able to acknowledge too.
Yeah. Will you have a Blue Christmas service this year? That's my first question.
Yes, it's going to be online, actually.
That was my next question, because we had a lot of questions about both celebration and lament. How do we do it virtually? Do you guys have ideas?
I wasn't responsible for that service, but I know that the basic parts of it. And so it's going to be, it'll be just sort of an honest storytelling about what's happening. It'll give people space in the context of the service itself to either write down or to think about what's missing or not right in this upcoming year, and have some music that will wrap around it, and some scripture reading and prayer time for the people, and for whatever they're going to be able to write in, here's what I'm going through at this time, to be able to hopefully respond in more real time with that. So that's what we're planning on at this point.
That's really helpful. Lacy, I've experienced you leading virtual gatherings in this weird COVID year. There's some things I've noticed you do. Do you know what they are? Will you say what they are, or do you want me to tell you what I've observed? What do you do when you're leading a virtual gathering to help people feel connected and like they're a part of it?
Well, yeah, you might have to fill in some gaps for me. But one of the things is we use the chat. So, leading people, I lead several spiritual direction groups, and we've needed to have places for lament in this time, and to sort of mark as things are moving along in this tumultuous 2020. And so we open up the chat and we allow ourselves a ritual as a place to park our feelings. And then we invite the participants to really write their sorrows and to write their laments and to write what's changing in the chat. And then as it's scrolling, we have the opportunity to host space and pray for each other as it's coming on. And that's been incredible. It's really giving every person a voice in a way we hadn't been able to do in some together gatherings. So I've been really grateful for that.
Love it. One thing I would suggest to people, depending on the size of people you're dealing with, is right now what we're doing here is on webinar mode on Zoom. But you can also get on meeting mode in Zoom, and then you're going to have a million little squares, and if somebody's flossing their teeth or something, you're going to see it, but you can see each other's faces. So it's interesting because Chris Hall and I are doing a retreat for a church this weekend, and Chris is insisting on doing it in meeting mode. And actually I was like, oh, it's a lot of variables, but he's right that the intimacy we will have seeing each other's faces will be very different. And Lacy, I know when you've led us with stuff for the Institute virtually, you've asked us every person to have a candle. So we've done it in meeting mode where we can all see each other. You've asked every person to have a candle. Yeah, mine's just right back there. You've had us all light our candle together to start. And you've also coached us about the awkwardness of it. And said, just, look at a square and love that square, right? Like just, communicate with your face, because very often you have to ask everyone to be on mute other than the person who's speaking. And, but you've said you're on mute, but use your face to show how glad you are to be with other people. Just that just because I know we got so many questions about virtual gatherings. Yeah. Just acknowledging the artifice and the awkwardness of it and coaching people, giving them some help through, and maybe considering being in meeting mode whenever it's feasible so that you all can see each other's faces. Would you guys add anything to that?
I guess I just, heard from our small group leaders here that overall they've been pretty surprised at how intimate some of the group gatherings can be. And I'm more extroverted, like put a body close to me, right. Mode. And so it's been hard for me in that way, but a lot of people have found it to be an actual freeing way for them to be more honest with what's going on. Maybe it provides a little bit of a distance, even though they're connected. And so, yeah, I think it's been very surprisingly good what's able to happen in those contexts and relationships that we thought would feel so artificial, from a distance. And yet people are able to be pretty honest, with whatever's happening in their lives.
Yeah. We said in the subtitle why we need Advent this year. Now, we need Advent every year, but we had this sense that there's something about Advent in this year that can be very helpful. Now, some people said, okay, if Advent is a season of waiting, some people wrote in and they said, how does it help me to have a season of waiting when I don't know when the end to COVID is? Like, it's great to go on the 25th. Okay, the Savior has come. But how do you think a season of waiting can help us when probably things aren't going to be completely resolved on December 25th? The ideas come to mind for you guys?
I have a concern that there's a longing for everything to get back to normal. And people are just sort of going to grab onto that. I want everything to get back to normal. I think waiting is a time where you can say, what about normal wasn't actually that good for me? And what wasn't helpful for me? And is there a new thing that that I can think about in how I relate to the world, or how I think about myself, or how I connect with others, that I can do in this season. And so I think you can only do that, not only, but I think primary time is when there is the space to go, I don't know exactly know what it's going to be, but now I have this time to think through what has been absolutely encouraging and life-giving and for me as a person, but also what patterns have I got into that have not been helpful at all. And I think especially around Christmas, this could be a really good, important time. We're having the conversation now. Can we be together with our kids even at a, I mean, and it's heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking to not think about being, why did I even say that? Now, but then you say, well, it sort of reminds you why you long for these relationships and why they're important. And maybe that's the part of waiting that, by Psalm 137 just came by the waters of Babylon. There we sat and wept as we longed for Zion, right? And they didn't know when they were going to get back to Jerusalem, and they didn't know when the exile was going to end for them. But they used it as a chance longer term to say, who are we as a people? And I think that could be a thing. We've a lot of things we might not be able to do that we've done in the past. Some of them you'll go, thank God we don't have to do those things. And then if you are saying that, it probably is a good marker to say, oh, well then maybe next year let's not program that in, because it really. So I think that's the can be the key waiting piece. Does feel like it's gone on a long time though. That's for sure. That's for sure.
I think waiting stirs up our vulnerability. We don't realize how vulnerable we are until we're waiting, because it's risky. We're not sure if where is the solid place to invest our hope. And in that vulnerability, as Kai said, it stirs up our longing. And I'm noticing in myself that I wonder if my wanter has been broken. I wonder if, especially maybe in North America, if our wanter has been broken. And in this time of waiting and this stressful season, if our deeper longings, I mean, we've now put our finger that we want to be together. We have really loved the internet and our phones for some time now, but it is not making us feel any better. It never took the place of sitting across, from the three of you, Kai and Carolyn, and sharing a meal and laughing and being together. I don't know if I knew that. So that's something about this waiting has helped recalibrate our wanters.
That's really helpful. Some people asked about the teaching that Advent is a time to long for the second coming of Christ. It's to remember maybe even three comings, right? The way Israel and the whole world longed for Christ to come, and then he came. How desperately we need for Christ to come as our ever-present teacher, savior, and friend, farther and farther into all the little nooks and crannies of our lives and our inner selves and our families and our churches and our communities. And then is it also a time to anticipate the time when the kingdom fully comes and every knee shall bow? How do you think about that? A few people asked about that.
Where you at, Lacy?
I think it's connected to longing again. Aren't each of those stirring up of our longing? What happens in Advent during waiting is the longing for the full fruition of this Christ child in mess and in a manger, to be fully in the world, and all that the vulnerability and danger that brought. I think I think Advent, of course, points to all three of those and the longing that we all have for that.
Yeah. I'm at a place right now where I keep thinking through, how is the kingdom being realized now?
Mm.
And for my sermon this upcoming weekend, I'm thinking about, it's the text about all the turmoil that's going to happen, and people are looking for signs, and Jesus has to say, no one knows the time. So just take a breath, I think, and that's a critical piece for us, right? I think we keep looking at the scriptures and going, oh, see, I told you, that's this, and that's this, and that's this. And Jesus said, just breathe into it, but keep awake. And I love that imagery of keep awake there, because it says, the kingdom of God is coming and has come, and it may be coming through you. And that's just part of my mind right now, because so much of the world that I sense and that I live in, and that maybe other people are sensing too, it's not even close to what that image of God is in this world. And and I go, what can I work on? And what is just going to be a gift from God whenever that happens. And what I can work on is saying, how do we allow this to be more realized? This incarnate, living Jesus life in this world. How do we allow that to become more realized? Because I look at our United States, and I say, guess what? For most years, most people would say, up to 70%, would say, I'm part of a Christian community. And look at the crap that we're dealing with. So 70% of us who are holding many of the prominent offices, structures around the country, and look at where we're in. I think there's a second coming that maybe needs to come into my life to renew what that image of compassion and sacrifice and generosity and hopefulness is again. So I keep coming, I just keep pulling that one, because I don't know when that second coming is going to happen. And gosh, it'd be, for those people, I've had funerals in the last week and a half ago. That's a real promise. That's a real promise, for them. So
yeah,
that's kind of the world that I'm working with at this point. Yeah.
Of Romans 8, and how creation is groaning, our spirits groan, the spirit is groaning, how we are meant to be a longing people who long for the kingdom. We know the kingdom is at hand, but we long for it to break in deeper realities. We do long for the day when all things have been redeemed and restored. And to have, to put on our calendar, now is the time for longing. And maybe, and I think you both have alluded to this, part of the gift in a season of disorientation, it has been so disorienting to lose all our regular rhythms and things we can count on. But what is the invitation in a season of disorientation? It's a chance to reorient to more life-giving things than some of the things that we were using to orient our lives, right? I think that's what I hear you saying. And back to Lacy's idea that one of the gifts of the church calendar is to let the life of Jesus mark our lives, not our usual shenanigans, right?
Yeah.
So helpful. I'm looking at the live questions because we're almost out of time. A lot are about resources we've mentioned and ones we haven't. This will be a webinar, will be really important for each of you to let us know how we can get the resources. You've mentioned, some of you were asking about my music, and we'll share that too. We will make a list with links of things we've talked about, things you guys have written, as well as some things we haven't talked about that we love, that are really great go-tos. Plus, tons of people have mentioned really meaningful resources in the chat, and I know Monty will not let those go. He will capture them all. He'll gather them all up. Kai, I don't want to put you on the spot, but a lot of people were asking about whether they could get access to the resource you created for your church. Is that a possibility, or do we need to talk about it after?
Yeah, no. I think we can send it to you. We'll just send it to you, and you can put it on the link that you send out to people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll send you the file.
And I want to ask you, Lacey, you have all these wooden toys that relate to the seasons of the year. And I know they were meant for children, but you've brought them to the Renovar Institute, and very full grown adults have enjoyed these toys quite a bit. Where did those come from? Where there are different ways to play act, different parts of the seasons, and
Yeah, you can get them. Worship, I think it's called Worship Wood Shop, has some of those. I even have some of them right here. I mean, one of the things that we like to do kind of as a family, and I actually learned this from a bunch of Benedictine nuns, is that they took all the pieces, all the nativity set pieces, and scattered them throughout the retreat center that they were in. And I was there for an Advent retreat, and they would every day, and if you were there, you were invited to pick up one of the pieces and move it just a little closer. And these wonderful nuns had also collected all kinds of little plastic toys, I think from McDonald's Happy Meals, for over like 40 years or something. And they had scattered them throughout the entire retreat center, and they would just move them. And so when it
closer
got
and closer, what were they moving to?
To the creche, to the barn where Jesus was
to the manger.
Born. Yeah. And so you could just look everywhere, and it was like everyone was being drawn in this direction. And I went on Christmas Eve one year, and I mean everyone there. There were dinosaurs, Woody from Toy Story. Everyone was there as Mary was preparing to bring Jesus into the world. And I find that fascinating. And I've had this little set, and I've invited the children at Haven House to play it over and over again. And there is something incredibly relatable to homeless children about Jesus not having a home. So they play the scene where Joseph goes to the inn over and over and over again. He is relatable to them. Wow. They can understand him. So having these toys out in your home and just open for folks to play with them, young or old, helps us play or pray our way into that importance of longing and waiting.
I love it. A few people asked about, what if I'm in my home alone? No kids, no grandkids here. Can't go to church maybe because it's on lockdown. I personally, I want to order the toys. I'm not alone, but if I was even, then no one else would get to play with them, and I could play with them the way I want. But anything you would say to someone who's home alone in this season?
I guess I would say that if there's anybody that you would be kind of willing to take a little bit of a risk with and say, hey, would you be willing to, I know we can't be together in person, but would you be willing to just, call each other or Zoom each other, a couple times a week, and we'll use whatever resource, so that it sounds like there's a bunch of resources that could be accessible. So many of them, all of them would be probably great personal journeys. So you can take that personal journey without being involved in a larger community. I guess that if possible, and we obviously don't know everyone's circumstance, if there would be at least one other person that would be willing to kind of take the journey, because I do think that there's something alive about just kind of going back and forth with one another about how we are and how this word is going to sink into us, or what we're struggling with in all of it. So you can, I will do a lot of things personally, that for my own devotional life, that could be, anyone could do. And then we would do things corporately that when we had more time as a family. So I think any of those resources can be very helpful for people to just kind of I was thinking about one of the things in a time of uncertainty, if you don't know the end, psychologically, they say it's just important for you to kind of know that there's something to do. And so like that daily journey, I think, is a sort of a nice piece in this season, because there is a great deal of uncertainty, but to say, well, today, what I'm going to do is this, And then tomorrow, what I'm going to do is this. And then the next day, what I'm going to do is this. I think it's a way for people to say, okay, there's movement. I'm taking a step forward. So,
That's really helpful.
yeah.
Anything you'd add to that, Lacy?
I can say from my own experience that in the most desolate, loneliest seasons of my life, ritual has held. Just knowing that I wasn't doing this. I learned to pray the daily office actually at night. I learned the night office when I had a 9-month-old who wasn't sleeping through the night. And it helped with isolation, the isolation that I felt. So I wonder if in just doing the simple lighting of the candles and just observing the increasing light, even going outside and being with the stars. I mean, we're in the season of a meteor shower actually this week. So just noticing that light and sensing yourself a part of something so much bigger.
Yeah.
So much bigger. Even not even bound by this planet. So much bigger. Just look up and beheld the heavens. You are not alone.
I love it.
That's great.
Thank you both so much for the resources you've created, for the lives you've lived, and for this conversation. Thank you to everyone who has been with us, the great questions you asked, all those resources you listed. There's really this idea that there's something to do each day. If all you do is just pick what resource you're going to use starting on the 29th, to each day lean a little bit into this season of longing, and to groan with all creation for Christ to come ever more fully in our hearts and minds and lives. That'll be good. Kai, will you seal all this up in some prayer for us?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, let's pray together. We're in a season that can hopefully open up our hearts and our minds and our spirits to the way, God, that you imagined this world to be, the way that we can be with one another, the way that we can see ourselves as we look through your eyes. And so we pray that wherever each of the persons represented on this webinar, those who will listen to this after we're long gone from this particular conversation now, that something in that will make them feel alive, that will say there's something about this story of a God who chose to come into this world with all of its pain and with all of its promise, and said, these are my people, this is my creation, let's work with one another to not only restore our lives, but restore our communities, and to help this world reflect what I imagined from the very beginning. So for in the smallest ways that we can do that in our own journeys, we are grateful for this encouragement. For the ways that we're part of the bigger story, as Lacy said, help us to just understand how beautiful and unique we are, how small in some ways, but how good and right each one of us has been made in your eyes. So for this journey, for the people that have gathered here today, for the people that will listen in, and for the Spirit of God to do something beautiful and unique and surprising, that's our hope in this season. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, friends.
Oh, thank you for inviting us into this. This is fantastic.
All right. Happy almost Advent, everybody.
Oh.
Blessings.
Peace of Christ to you.
And also to you. Thanks, everyone.